Hey, what's up everybody? My name's Thomas. I'm the author of the file. And first off, I'd like to say thank you very much for purchasing Pop-Up Book Starter Kit. In these series of videos, what I'm going to be going over is exactly how to edit the project to get you up and running as quick as possible. And in order to do that, I'm going to break these up into smaller, more specific tutorials so that you can use as references later if you have a specific part you're working on. So let's dig into the project in the main comp. And if you're not there already, go to, in the project panel, double click on the main comp right there. And if you're not seeing this Effects and Controls panel, go to Window and Effects and Controls. So now we're all on the same page. You can see that we have within the main comp all the different pages and intros for Pop-Up Book. On the very top, we have the two controller layers. And these two controller layers work really well because if you edit something within here, it carries through the entire project. So it's a huge time saver to do it this way. Below these two layers, we have the intros, and we have the intro straight, intro angle, and intro main, and they're all color coordinated for you so you can see exactly what you're working with. Now below that, we have all the different pages, and each page is broken up into the particles, which is just the particles that you saw in the demo when the book opens up, and the actual page with the pop-ups, and the zoom, the close-up camera view of the different pages. And all the different pages are set up this way, so if you understand one page, you'll understand the entire project. So let's dig into the book control layer, and within that, the first layer that you're going to see is the disable shadows. Now, this is a really cool new feature in version 3 of the pop-up book, and if we just click this, it instantly the shadows turn on and off. Basically, you set up your pop-up and you animate it, and it just works. Now below that, we have the custom background, and there's actually two styles of backgrounds in Pop-Up Book Starter Kit. The first version is the custom background, and you can see that if we just scroll down in the main comp, we have the custom background right here, and if we edit this, that it will change the background right here. And essentially what the custom background is doing is it's taking page 2 and it's basically cutting out the background and making it so it's entirely transparent. Now the standard background does have the advantage of being a little bit faster when you're rendering and when you're working with the different comps. So for example, if we turn the custom background off and we scroll down, you can see that now we're getting the colors from right here. So when would you want to use this versus the custom background? If you have a background that you only want to be this radial gradient and you want it to be the same color the entire time, then you would use this background. But if you have a background that you want to change colors like I did in the demo, then you're going to want to use the custom background. Now below that, we have all the different pages and cover and inner cover, and this works really well because you can basically just go in, change the color, and boom, it's all set up and ready to go. And if we turn on the shadows, you can see that it has that page break in the different pages, and it just looks like a really crisp, clean package for the final result. Now I'm going to be going over the page designs later, but for right now, just know that these work well for the base of the colors, and then you can add whatever designs you want on top of these. Now let's go, we talked about the background. The page left and right shading, you probably won't have to mess with these. I added them in there just in case. If we turn back on the shadows and we scroll in just a little bit, there's a page break shading that's happening right here, and you can amplify that by editing the ramps on the left and right page shading. So in the next tutorial, what we're going to be going over is how to create a pop-up. Let's all go from our main comp and double click into page 2. Now this brings up a good spot that I wanted to mention. When you are in page 2, you have to select which intro you used. So if you just used the standard intro main intro, then you won't have to do anything. But if you did, for example, use the angle or the straight, you'll want to enable that and disable the different layers within that. And now, as you can see, this is transparent behind there like we had mentioned because we have the custom background enabled. And I'm going to change that for the tutorials on this. So let's go to book control and let's disable shadows also to work a little bit faster and disable custom background. And let's choose something kind of neutral, lighter, like what we had for the custom background. There, that'll work. Now we'll go back to page 2. Okay, now that we have, and let's change this back to intro just just because that's the one that we have selected in our main comp, and double click into here. And now I'm going to make this bigger so that you can see exactly what's in here. Now it looks like there's a lot of layers in here, but it's actually very simple to edit, I can assure you. What we have are all the different pop-ups, and they're grouped into bundles of 3. So each pop-up has a controller layer, it has a matte, and then the actual pop-up itself. Now you don't really have to worry about the matte layer, but the controller layer is very important, because that's how you're going to be moving the position of the pop-up. Now that's very important. You do not want to edit the position of the pop-up directly from the pop-up layer. Now the reason for that is because you don't want to be moving the actual position of the pop-up. You want to be moving the anchor point. So I set up this position controller setup so that you could easily move these around, and it would be kind of a more natural for After Effects users for editing the X, Y, and Z position. So you don't have to think about anything other than inserting your pop-up, moving the position of this position controller, and it's just working. Now I set these up 5 on the left side and 5 on the right side, and I color coordinated them. Blue is on the left and right red. So just remember right red. And below that we have the camera and the lights and the shadow layers, and this gets to be pretty advanced, so I'm not even going to touch any of this stuff, but you basically don't want to mess with any of that. All the stuff you want to worry about are these top blue and red layers. Now let's dig into one of the pop-ups. If we double click into there, you can see that all we have to do is insert our pop-up into this layer. And this layer here, this bottom shading layer, that's optional. In 3D programs, it's called ambient occlusion, when there's an object that's being shaded from the page. And if you have this off, it'll be fine. You don't necessarily need to have it in there. It just adds a little bit of realism to the scene. So I added that in all the different pop-up pages. And if you're familiar with how mattes work, it's just having an alpha matte to the layer. So let's go over an example of inserting a real pop-up. I have the demo images here, so I'm just dragging these on here. I just kind of made a sprite sheet with all the different pop-ups. I could see if you wanted to take your pop-ups and save them individually and have them all ready to go. I just put them all in one layer for you guys to save space. So then what you're going to want to do is, having that selected, I'm just using the pen tool by hitting G, and I'm masking out, I guess it's not the pen tool, it's the mask tool. I'm masking out that layer, and then I'm going to hit Command D to duplicate it, hit M, and delete the mask. And now I want to put the head in there. So I'm taking the head and I'm masking that out as well. And it's pretty simple doing it this way, but it's probably more simple to just save them out individually. And just to have a little bit of separation, add a little bit of realism, I added a drop shadow to the head down with like a 10 and turn the opacity down to like 30, something like that, just so there's a little bit of separation in there. And we can't forget about his legs. So hit M again, delete that. Find his legs in our little sprite sheet. There they are. I'm going to disable these layers because I'm kind of making it more confusing than it needs to be. There, so now we have our monster. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these layers here, and automatically if you delete those layers, it's going to matte the layer above it. And we don't want it to matte the legs, we want it to matte the arms, because that's the thing that would technically be touching the page. Now, if you're not familiar with how the different alpha and luma mattes work, and you don't want to worry about this bottom shading, I completely understand. You can just delete that and not worry about it, and you have your pop-up all ready to go. If you are comfortable with them, you can just simply set that up. There, pretty basic. Then we go back and ta-da, we have our pop-up, and it works so slick. And I have the subtle sway that the pop-up creates already animated for you. All right, so now that we have our pop-up in the project, we'll want to position the pop-up. So like I said, you want to select the controller layer, and let's move this over just a little bit so you can see all the different things. Maybe we want to move it back in Z space a little bit, or forward. We can position it however we want, in X or Y, moving it left or right, and in Y space if we want to move it up or down. Now I wouldn't really suggest moving it too much in Y space because you can start to have results that you're not going to be happy with if it's in white space and not touching the page when the page actually closes. So a good rule of thumb is just probably to leave this at 0 as long as the pop-up is touching the bottom part of the page. Now, one more quick thing I want to go over is that actually the way the project is set up, this frame 900 right here is pretty significant to the project. The project is set up at 30 frames a second. So after 900 frames or 10 seconds, the page turn begins to happen. Now, you don't really have to worry about that unless you're animating your pop-ups. And I'm going to be going over that in a later tutorial, but I just kind of want you to recognize now that the way the pop-up book is set up, you would have the page turn and then animate and do whatever you want it to do in there. And as long as the pop-ups settle, you're not going to have any issues with it going to the page turn. But if you have it animating or you have a loop or something happening, you're going to want to take special note of this frame 900. And like I said, we're going to be going over that in a later tutorial, but let's continue back to the main and turn on our shadows. And boom, we have accurate photorealistic looking shadows made directly within After Effects. So the next tutorial, what we're going to be going over is adding additional pop-ups beyond the 5 that I have set up for the different placeholders on the left and the right side pages. We'll go to controller 5 and I'm going to right click on the controller and I'm going to go to reveal layer source in project. Now that we have that revealed, what I'm going to do is hit Command D and that duplicates that. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for the pop-up 5. I'm going to go to reveal layer source in project and I'm going to hit Command D and I'm going to duplicate that. Now what we want to do is select the controller all the way to the bottom. What we're going to want to do is hit Command D with all of those highlighted. And I'm just going to bring those down below there. And it's not going to work as is. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to replace some of these comps with the new ones that we just created. So if we select page 2 left pop-up 5 using the replace trick in After Effects by holding Option on a Mac and Control on a PC, we're going to the new layer that we created highlighted and the old one that we want replaced highlighted. We're going to click, drag, and drop it on top of there and then release option. Exact same thing for the new controller that we created. Controller 6. And it's worth noting too on this part that you want to make sure that this is parented to this layer 22. So just we have one more step. If you hit UU on the pop-ups, you can see that we have an expression on this Z position. Now all you're going to want to do is just change this just one thing. It looks confusing, but don't let it intimidate you. All we have to change is that 5 to a 6 to the same as the page 2 left controller. Now you can see that we have our new pop-up all made and ready to go. And that's all there is to it. And just note too that copying and pasting is not the same as hitting Command D, duplicating. Even though it sounds like it's the same thing, it's not. So you want to make sure you're duplicating them and not copying and pasting them. In this video, we're going to be going over how to edit the cover of the pop-up book. And the same for the back cover applies, that we're going to be learning about the front cover. And if we double click within the intro main cover, you can see that we have essentially the exact same setup that you just saw for the pop-ups. So basically, the front cover and the back cover designs are set up the exact same as the pop-ups, it's just they don't rotate up. So you're going to want to use the controller to position the cover designs how you want them. And you can even move in Y-axis the designs up or down. And I guess that would be advantageous if you wanted like a little bit of shading within your design to add a little bit of depth to it. But I can see if you wouldn't want that at all, you can just leave that at 0 and you won't have any shading on there. If we go into the front cover design, you can see that I just have a simple design within here, and this would be a great spot to put your text or your book title or whatever you want within there. Now, one of the things I also want to showcase with this is if we turn off intro main and we turn on intro angle, and let that render for just a second, you can see that that is automatically updated in there as well. So very cool. If you have something that you're not quite sure which one you want to use, you can enable the different ones individually and test out to see which one you like best for your pop-up. Now, the reason why this is working is because if we go into it, you can see that they're sharing this front cover design comp. This works really well, except for if you move the position. So let's say for an extreme example, we wanted it here, which we wouldn't ever want that. But you can see we move this in the X position 56 spaces to the left. If we go back to the main, you can see that that obviously updated. But if we go to intro angle, that didn't update. So the different intros don't update the position, but they do update the actual design of the front cover. And the same concept applies for the back cover as well. In this video, we're going to be talking about animated pop-ups and how to treat them so that you don't get a pop when the page turn happens. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the exact same rotation that I added in the demo. So I'm going to put this anchor point back in the middle of his head, hit R, and then I'm going to pull up the expression that I included for you within the project files. And on the rotation, I'm going to enable an expression by holding Option while clicking on the keyframe icon. And I'm going to paste that in there. And that's going to create that slight head rotation. Now what I want to do is I want this to be pretty extreme. So I'm going to amplify it by 40 and we'll have the decay be 0.2. So that's pretty good. It goes on for quite a ways. So you can see that the problem would happen is you have your pop-up and you don't want it to be on for too long. You just want it to showcase like a quick page like what I did in the demo. Now watch what happens when I go forward one frame. It jumps. And you probably can't tell it's happening as much unless I go a couple frames before that. But what's happening is, like I had kind of quickly mentioned before, but what's happening is once it gets to frame 900, all right, so you can see now what's happening is it's jumping, and we don't want that. And there is a simple solution to it. If we go into page 3 and we go into page 2 pop-ups, you can see like we had quickly mentioned that at frame 900 is where the page turn actually starts. Now the issue is happening because if we go back to the main right here, the pop-up frame right here is referencing, we'll put a keyframe right here. But now if we go back and go one frame forward and go into the pop-ups at frame 900, so it's jumping from this keyframe right here to this keyframe. And the way to get around that is what we're going to do is we're going to split the pop-up so that it ends there and it continues on frame 900. So let's do that. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the matte and the left pop-up. And I'm going to go over this slowly so that you guys have a chance to really understand what's happening with this. And I'm going to hit Command D. Now I'm not hitting Command C, Command V to copy and paste it. If you do that, which you can do, just make sure that it has the parent to the same parent as the original one. That's the problem with doing the copy and paste method, is it doesn't automatically update the parent for you. So now that we have the two mattes and the two pop-ups set up, we want to take our current time indicator to that frame. Now what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to highlight just the left pop-up. I don't want to highlight the matte. And holding Option, hit the right bracket. And that will trim the layer to that keyframe. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with this page 2 left pop-up one. I'm going to hold Option and hit left bracket. And that's going to trim that so that the beginning of it is on this exact keyframe on frame 175. Now the next step I want to do is I want to move this over by one more frame. All right, so now we're on the same page. We have this pop-up split exactly how we want it. Now what you want to do is hit U on the keyboard, and you can see that there's a rotation, an X rotation on this pop-up. So you want to click these two keyframes right here and drag them over so that they begin right when that keyframe starts. And then the last step that we want to do is bring our current time indicator to frame 900 and just slide this over. The quicker way to do it would be the shortcut, which is just hitting left bracket. But whatever. So you would just slide this over so that that frame starts right at 900. Now if we go back to main, and we go to this frame, and then we go forward one more frame, our pop is gone. And this is the exact same setup that I used in the demo. So if you want, feel free to check out how I did that. I did it with many aspects of it. Obviously the monster, I did it with the ship with the oars. I did it with the bubbles in the witch's pot. I did it with the frog, scene with the frog, and also with all the different plants that were in that scene as well. So there's a lot of different times when you're going to want to know how to do this technique. So let's just do it one more time quick again without one that needs to be done. So let's say, for example, at frame 250, we want to split that pop-up. So what we're going to want to do is take the matte and the pop-up, highlight them, hit Command D. We're going to want to take the left pop-up and holding Option, right bracket to trim that. The other split that we want, the bottom one, not the matte. And that's really important to note, again, that you don't want to move the matte. Because I can see how somebody would go like this and highlight both of these and bring them over, and you can't do that. It won't work. The matte is set up specifically for the page turns to kind of hide them as the page turn is happening. So we'll undo that. And I accidentally bumped this over just a little bit, so I'm going to bring this back. Okay, and then holding Option again, hit left bracket. So now we have the split done. Move it over one more frame. Hit U. Highlight the two keyframes. Bring them over. And then bring that to frame 900. So once we're on frame 900, I just hold Shift so that it snaps to the keyframe that I want, and then hit left bracket. And that's all you'd have to do. And again, if you have a pop-up that doesn't animate, you don't have to worry about this step at all. In this video, we're going to be going over how to edit the page designs. Now, what we want to do is, let's go from our main. Let's say we want to edit page 3 page design. So you go into page 3 pop-ups, and I've already disabled all the right side pop-ups so that we can see the design that we're going to be adding in. Now what you want to do is go to page 3, twirl that down, page 3 comps, twirl that down, and this is the folder we're looking for. Now if we go into our page 3 right page design, you can see that we have an empty comp. And let's add something in here. Let's just make a generic looking shape and go back to the pop-ups. And now our design is right in there on the page. And if we go back to the main, you can see that as the page is turning, that this design sticks onto the page. And there's a ton of uses I can see for people. And for most people, this is probably exactly what you're looking for. You can put your texture in here. You can put whatever you want in your page design. And you can animate this even, but that's the part that gets a little bit more complicated, is when you animate the page designs. Now, if we go back to the main comp, let's see the problem happening. Now, if we go into the page 3 right design, and let's create the same problem that the pop-ups have. Let's create an animation by setting a keyframe here and then going forward a little bit and setting a keyframe down. And we'll create an expression by holding Option while hitting the keyframe and do loop out ping pong. And this will just create an infinite animation back and forth. And it's just showcasing the exact same problem that we had with the monster earlier, that it's not really jumping that bad actually, but any jump is not good. So we're going to completely eliminate that problem. Similar to the pop-ups, I don't know the length of how long you want your pages to be open for. So for example, if you wanted the page to be open for exactly this long, now if we go through, I'm guessing the jump is going to be a little bit more drastic. There. So that's what we want to avoid. So we're going to be using the exact same technique for the page design to split that and continue it on frame 900 as we did with the pop-ups. So now that we have the last frame that we know we want our page 3 to have, let's go into page 3, go into the pop-ups page, scroll down, and go into the page 3 open. Now what we're looking for is this page 3 right page design. And you double click into there, and it's important too to note that you don't want to move your current time indicator at all. Luckily, it keeps track of the keyframe that we're working on in all of the different compositions from the main composition. So we'll double click into there, and you can see that this is the exact frame, the last frame that's being used in the page design for our page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the layer, and I'm going to duplicate it. And on the top layer, I'm going to hit Option right bracket, and on the bottom layer, Option left bracket, and then slide that forward by 1 frame. So you can see that that's exactly where our cut's going to happen. Now all we have to do is just go to frame 900, exactly 900. So you can see on the left hand side, and I'm going to use the page up and page down to get exact on there. And then I'm going to hit the left bracket on there to make sure that exactly on frame 900, the layer is starting. Okay, now we can go back to our main comp, and you can see if we go forward 1 frame, that it's working perfectly. Our page design doesn't jump at all. So for most people, you probably won't even need to have an animated design, but just in case you do, those were the steps. In this video, we're going to be going over the zoom or close-up camera comps that you can control the camera in. And with this setup, it works really slick, but there are a couple things you're going to need to know about. So let's go back to the main comp and let's go into the page 2 zoom. Now you notice that we have almost the exact same setup that we have before. There's just a few slight differences. The first difference is we don't need a matte layer in this. The matte layers are only important for the page turns. And as you can see in here, I have markers saying don't use frames before this and don't use frames after this. That's basically limiting you that you cannot edit the project during the page turns. But while the pop-ups are fully flat, you can do whatever you want with the camera. Now, I have this set up so that there's the camera, and the camera is being controlled by a null layer. And it's a little bit advanced to explain why it's this way, but just know it makes things a little bit easier for editing the position of the camera this way than editing it directly on the camera for a lot of people. So I just set that up so that you can just easily go in here and edit the position, and you're going to be able to understand exactly what's happening. So right away, you can probably see that the camera is a little bit too far off. So let's zoom back. Wait a second. What's up with this? There should be the rest of the book. And that's one of the limitations with controlling your own camera. And this is as good a time as any to explain that Pop-Up Book is actually made from a hybrid of using a 3D program, Cinema 4D, and completing it in After Effects. And so it's getting a lot of the attributes and the shadows from After Effects to create that real depth. But there's a lot of limitations in After Effects that I couldn't create the whole project in After Effects because there's not true 3D geometry and polygons that are happening to create the depth that I needed to create Pop-Up Book. So with that being said, what's actually happening here is there is 0 renders from the 3D program in here. So you have complete control, and the only limitation is that you have to make sure that the user doesn't see below the book. So within that, you can edit it quite a bit. You can edit the rotation if you want. The different angle will turn the rotation to 5 degrees and then bring this down. So you can edit this quite a bit without revealing that there's no book below it. So let's just get our camera set up how we want it. Let's just say that right here is good, and then we want it to just go over on the x-axis about 50 frames, and then we'll delete that keyframe and then move this one over, so then we just have the camera going from left to right. Very similar to what you saw in the demo. Now, the layers below this don't require, as I said, a matte layer. But what you're going to notice right away is that this works, but similar to how the cover has the shared designs with the different intro styles, the zoom layers are sharing the pop-ups with their respective page designs. So you're not going to get the position where you want it. For example, you moved it over 37 pixels and you go back to the page design, it's not going to be updated in there. So the way around that I found works the best is if you go into page 2, into the pop-ups, and you set up your pop-ups exactly how you want them. So you get everything animated, you get all the different layers turned on. So let's say, for example, we want these layers turned off, and we only want these layers on, okay? So this is how we want our page to look for demonstration purposes. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the top layer and go down to the bottom of the right pop-ups, and on this break, holding shift so you're selecting all the pop-ups. Now hit Command C and copy all those pop-ups into there. And then go back to the main, go into the zoom comp, select the old pop-ups, delete them, and then going above this left light, paste, Command V, them in place. Now all the pop-ups will be the exact same as the page 2. And this is a pretty simple workaround to do it that way, to copy and paste them in from the other one. And all the positions are the exact same as what they should be, so it basically just works. And of course, if you go back and you go to the main, and we'll turn this layer off and turn the zoom on and go to the book control, and you enable the shadows, they also work in the zoom comp as well. In this video, I'm going to be quickly going over the Quickflip intro, and you'll definitely want to use some of the earlier references to creating a pop-up or adding more if you want, but it's a very, very simple setup. All you have to do is just take all of these layers and you can disable them, and then bringing your current time indicator to the start of the Quickflip, hit B, and that will bring the work area to start at frame 704. And you can bring this, if you want the intro to start out without the book moving longer, you can adjust this for as long as you want, and then sliding the work area over. Now the Quickflip is going to happen, and it's the exact same as any other page. It's just quickly flipping directly to page 5. And that can be useful for two reasons. It could be useful for a lot of people if they just want a one-page example of something or to showcase something, and that's it. For other people, they might want only a 5-page pop-up book. And the cool thing about the Quickflip is it actually syncs up with page 6. So you can have the Quickflip go into page 6. The only thing you have to note about this technique is go into page 6 and you'll see that you have to enable the Quickflip pop-ups and disable the page 5 pop-ups. In this last video, I just want to quickly go over with you a quick trick that you can add or take out pages from your pop-up book. And it's not really adding or taking out, it's just a trick to make it look like it's having more pages or less pages in your book. And this technique is done by having a page and then cutting to a zoom and then cutting to a different page in the book. Now let's do an example of that. Let's say we only want 8 total pages in our book. We don't want the last 2 pages. What we're going to do is we're going to take page 8 and page 9 and all these comps associated with it, and we're going to turn them off and drag them over. And then we're going to take these page 10 and bring them up, too far up, and slide them over. Now, you get your page 7 exactly how you want it. Let's say that this was the exact length that we wanted. But you're going to have some sort of a crossfade in there going to the zoom. So we'll take the opacity at 100 and then we'll have it go to here and turning the zoom on. So then it will transition from page 7 and then go over and transition into the zoom comp. Now what we want to do is move this page 10. We don't want this particle to be showing, and we're just going to move this over like that. Now I'm going to take the opacity, instead of keyframe there, go over a few more frames and turn the opacity down on there. Now what we're doing is we're cutting from here to here, which is all the same, and then to here. Now this doesn't look the same at all. What you're going to have to do is go into the book control, and you're going to want to copy the same settings that you use for page 7 onto page 10. Now we're getting closer. Now obviously you would have real pop-ups in there and not just the placeholders, but I think you understand the concept of what you're doing is you're cutting to a different pop-up, and most users will never notice that you did this. I would be willing to bet that you could cut from page 2 to page 9 and most people wouldn't actually notice. I did it in the demo, and I can see lots of uses for this, especially the other way around. Like, let's say, for example, you get to page 8 and you want more than 10 pages. What I would do is render it out then, and then I would make a second version of the After Effects project file, and then I would start back at page 3, and then I would have the transition happen from the zoom on page 8 to then the new page 3 that had the same pop-ups as page 8. I know that might get a little bit confusing, but that's the technique that you can do to add more pages. I will say too, it's not going to work to just copy and paste the pop-ups from page 7 like we did for the zoom comps and paste them into page 10. It's not going to work, unfortunately, because of the way that the controllers are set up with their specific spots that to get the pop-ups to actually rest exactly on the pages. It's going to be really close and you could maybe get by with it, but I don't think so. I would just recommend putting the effort in of putting in the pop-ups and guessing and getting them as close as you can. As long as they're close, the viewers aren't going to be able to tell. If you guys have any questions at all, I want you to feel free to contact me at any time. I'm happy to help out in any way that I can. Thanks again, you guys. Have a great day and good luck with your project.